I'm just gonna find out why the Roman Empire fell.
Kids died before they hit puberty. So, I mean, put yourself in the place of an average inhabitant of the ancient world. If you were an ancient person, 3 or 4 of your kids probably would have died. You would have buried your children. And nowadays we think of that as an unusual thing. And just psychologically, that's a huge thing. You would have seen multiple of your siblings die. If you're a woman, for example, if you were lucky enough to make it to, let's say, age 13, you probably would have to give birth 4 or 5 times.
Fall of the Roman Empire.
Can we talk about the crisis of the 3rd century and the aforementioned Western and Eastern Roman empires, how it split?
Yeah, so, I mean, after Rome starts to go downhill, as you enter the 3rd century, so the 200s, so we're moving out of the Golden Era now. I mean, a famous Roman historian, Cassius Dio, who lived right at that moment, very famously wrote, of the transition of Marcus Aurelius to what follows, our kingdom now descends from one of gold to one of rust and iron. So even people who were alive at the time had a distinct sense something is going downhill here. And that's interesting.
All right, just let the significant declines. Decline points of the Roman Empire. What happened? It's complex. Crisis of the 3rd century, around 200 CE. Instability, rapid succession of emperors with over 20 rulers in 50 years. Damn. We get about 10 every 50 years, and even less than that probably. Widespread economic turmoil, hyperinflation. Damn, they got hyperinflation. Repeated invasions, internal rebellion. All right.
Because, you know, usually great historical moments are retroactive. And I mean, here's a guy who said, oh, something's going wrong. Something's really going badly
Okay,
now.
but what leads to hyperinflation? It's printing of money, right?
And a lot of it becomes that the secret is out. That what makes an emperor is who commands the most swords. And so
So in other words, they're overstretched. What did they spend their money on? Is there a...
you start to get rebellion.
Documentary? There's a documentary on it. Explained in 30 minutes, yes.
If you're a history buff, buckle up. We're diving into the dramatic fall of the Roman Empire. Political instability weakened the leadership. Picture a chaotic Roman Senate. Figures arguing, pointing fingers. Leadership crumbled from within. Economic troubles and an over-reliance on slaves only added fuel to the fire. Imagine a Roman marketplace with empty stalls, then slaves in chains. A crumbling economy, weakened by overdependence. Stay tuned as we continue our journey through history's most...
Yeah, but usually everything's from... You can blame everything on the economy, right?
By various Roman generals, each declaring himself emperor. So you'd always had this to a certain degree, but they had kept it in check during the 2nd century AD. But in the 3rd century, you sometimes get 3 or 4 generals in different parts of the empire all declaring themselves emperor, and then they all rush off to Rome to fight a multi-way civil war. And of course, while they're doing this, the board...
All right, explain the Pax Romania. Pax Romania, the great...
The Roman Empire's history is fraught with wars with several peoples and nations. But at the empire's pinnacle, the Great War ceased and Rome went through almost 200 years of relative peace. This period became known as the Pax Romana, that is, the period between 27 BC and 180 AD. During this period, Rome was hegemonic in its sphere of influence. It is considered the golden age of Roman imperialism. Order and prosperity spread in the empire, and the Romanization of peoples considered barbaric was hastened. In this period, there were only minor revolts. But the Pax Romana would not have been possible without the legions, who responded promptly to those who wished to disturb Rome's enforced peace. The Roman Empire's...
So the guy that came right after Julius Caesar, he's the first emperor, Augustus, right? The first one? Caesar Augustus, grandnephew and adopted son of Julius Caesar, gradually acquired further power. So this is about 30 BC. '14 to 16? Oh, 27 BC to 14 AD. To 19th of August. They got that exact date. Okay, so 37. The year 37. That's when Jesus was born. What happened to Jesus? Wait, Augustus. Peak moment is 117 BCE. Is CE. Emperor Trajan would be the best candidate as it marked. Economic prosperity. Alright, so this is when they peaked. This is Pax Romana.
History is fraught with
Alright, how long does this go on for? This is your drawing, bro? Okay, yeah, that definitely declined. How do you go from this beauty to a fucking kid drawing? And what is this, man? I could draw this. Constantine. Damn, that's a long ass history. So it was a gradual decline. Okay. All right,
Borders are undefended, so barbarians start to see opportunity and come across and start raiding. They start burning and pillaging farms. The civil wars are destroying cities and farms, so the economy is kind of tanking. Then there's less money coming in as taxes, so when one guy finally wins, he jacks up the tax rate to try and make up for it, but now there's fewer people able to pay, and it's all just a vicious cycle. The Romans start to debase the coinage, which means, you take in a gold coin, you melt it down, mix it in with 10% something less valuable, and then stamp it and say it's worth the same.
Yeah.
Well, people aren't stupid. They're going to know that's only 90% of that gold coin.
There's an Italic settlement dating from 8th century BC that grew into the city of Rome. Alright, go on. The height of AD 717. Alright, go on. I get it. History of Rome. Established. But this is the Roman Republic. Conquest during Latin War. Third Samnite War. First Punic War, there we go. Against Carthage. And they won that war. And then like 10-20 years later we get the Second Punic War. Second Punic War. Are they gonna take Spain though? You should take Spain. All of Spain. Third Macedonian War. And they get Greece. Third Punic War and Fourth Macedonian. This is when Carthage gets wiped out. Social War. Egypt is a de facto. This is Julius Caesar's time, right? Gallic War, Caesar's Civil War. And Jesus is born. Here. And you're saying it peaked in 180 AD. That's when they say it peaked. Roman Parthian War. Colosseum was built. Colosseum was built. So it just stays like that. Whoa, what's the music, man? Invade modern Scotland. So they had France and Spain and Italy and Turkey and some parts of Egypt, the whole Nile civilization, entirety of Carthage. It was a big civilization. But apparently this is when they peaked. And now their decline begins. The Gallic Empire. Whoa, what is the Gallic Empire? So they just appeared? Was not part of the centralized Roman Empire, but it was formed by Roman officials, so they had a civil war. It was established in 260 CE during the crisis of 3rd century period of severe instability. Okay, so they just up and appeared. It was a civil war, basically. Oh, there they go. I thought they were gonna stay. Civil Wars of Tetrarchy. Constantine and Great Lineage. What was that? They're still there. What do you mean they declined? You mean the economy? Okay, so when it comes to GDP, chart. Give me the chart. Huh? What do you mean? What do you mean 800 kilograms of wheat? What the fuck is that? Can't you like convert that? What am I supposed to do with this? GDP per capita of Roman Empire's provinces in 14 AD. Levels of income in dollars? International dollars? Okay, just show me the GDP. How do you calculate it? Lead pollution. So they just come and go. Roman Empire. They split! Whoa, why did they split? Why did they split? Later known as Byzantine Empire due to administrative and military economic challenges. This division was a gradual process, but it was formalized in 395 after the death of Emperor Theodosius, who permanently split the empire between his two sons. So these are his two sons. Sack of Rome. What the fuck does that mean? The Huns under Sack of Rome. What is Sack of Rome? And there they go. Wow, they just, what happened? They just disappeared. The Roman Empire just disappeared. Wait, Odoacer conquered the western Roman capital. Ravenna forced Romulus to abdicate and declare himself king of Italy. So what's left is the Eastern Roman Empire. After some 1,200 years of independence, nearly 700 years as a great power, the rule of Rome in the West ended. Various reasons for Rome's fall have been proposed ever since, including loss of republicanism, moral decay, military tyranny, class wars, slavery, economic stagnation, environmental change, disease, decline of Roman race, da-da-da-da-da. Okay, show me the population. Give me the chart. Let's go by year. Demography of the Roman Empire. Right. Age? Age what? No, I by year. Like CE. Total empire in millions. European part, Asian part. Carthage had 50k. But that's not what I want. I want to see the population chart. Like, does it grow or decrease? Population of Rome. Huh? What? Huh? What is this? It went boom and then bop. What happened here to there? What happened to... you know what? Just list Roman Empire population by year. They had about 4 to 5 million. Early Roman Empire, they had 50 million. I think this was when they had the Second Punic War, right? Around here. It's 200 BC. It was a 17-year-old. 200 BC, right here. It was about 10 million. And it peaked here. 150 CE. Year 150. Middle Roman Empire. Crisis of 3rd century. Okay. Late Roman Empire. Damn, their population do decrease. What the fuck happened? And it decreases to 2 to 3 million. Continuous wars with Persia and the early Islamic Caliphate. Estimates are due to lack of major factors influencing population changes include wars and invasions, epidemics, economic cycles. Why did their population decrease? Why did their population start decreasing after 150 CE? Due to combination of factors, stability, that affect the stability, economy, public health, that should come out over time, leading to significant population losses. The plague of Cyprian. Yeah, but it can't be the only reason. Like, it's supposed to grow, right? Population is supposed to grow, so what happened? Over-farming, deforestation led to soil depletion. Okay. Social disruption and morale. A decline in birth rate could have resulted in hardships of war. That's not why, bro. That can't be why. Because you had growth all the way starting from like 400 BC. Okay, so let's just map it out. Population trend. Let's just map it out. City of Rome, not city of Rome. 150 BCE. CE. Yeah, that's about here. And people are saying this is when they peaked. AD. And then what's up with this collapse here? About 400. They split, all right, fair. Okay, how about their how rich were they? I keep seeing this chart. What is this? Less pollution, Mediterranean shipwrecks? Why do I care? GDP. What about GDP? What about their economy? Roman Empire economy extensive fluctuations, peak during Pax Romania in 27 to 180, but prolonged decline. Okay, how do you know? Yeah, I get that, like the plague and blah blah blah. Piracy, okay. Urban decline. Plagues reduced, over-reliance on slave labor. Growing military needs became a financial black hole. Economic disparity, wealth became increasingly concentrated in the hands of the elite. Eastern Roman Empire, centered around Constantinople in the east. The Western Roman Empire, economically weaker, relying more on subsistence farming, suffered greater disruptions and invasions and internal strife. The collapse of the Western economy contributed to the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 CE. Attempts at recovery, reforms by Constantine. Conclusion. In today's dollars, how much would their GDP be? So when they peaked, it's around 20 to 30 billion. To convert this into today's dollars, we adjust for inflation, average multiplier 3 to 4, so 60 to 120. That's not big at all. GDP per capita estimated at 500 to 800 USD, equivalent to roughly 1,000 to 3,000. That's not bad actually. Comparison to modern economy. This is small size, medium sized modern country, Luxembourg or Belarus. Its per capita GDP was significantly lower. It's an agrarian, yeah. Legions. It just fucking collapses like that. What? Okay, but which Rome? After 500, is this the western or eastern part? In the city of Rome. In the city of Rome. Whoa. What? It declined dramatically. At its height in the 2nd century CE, it housed 1 million Roman people, making it the largest city. By the early Middle Ages, it had dwindled down to 10 to 20k. What? Political instability. The Visigoths, under Erlich sacked Rome. The capital's political and symbolic importance declined. Collapse of the Western Roman Empire in 470 CE, reduced its status from a capital city to a peripheral city under the control of barbarian kingdoms. As the empire fragmented, administrative economic focus shifted to other centers like Ravenna or Constantinople. Okay, so people just left, right? Sack of Rome, repeated invasion. Is that what the sack of Rome is? Is that what the sack of Rome is? The Visigoth looted the city, causing panic and mass displacement. The Vandals sacked Rome, further damaging its infrastructure and driving residents away. So they had to relocate, right? Maintenance of essential infrastructure, aqueducts, sewers, roads became increasingly neglected. Aqueducts were damaged during the wars, cutting off fresh water supplies. So the poor sanitation, outbreaks of disease like cholera and dysentery. Public services like grain dole, free distribution of food ended, forcing many people to leave in search of subsistence. Plague of Justinian. Social and religious transformation, rise of Christianity, and decline of pagan traditions transformed Rome's identity. Okay, so year 150, Rome peaks. About year 150. And they get invaded. What? Okay, summarize the sack of Rome. Sacked by Gauls. What happened? Gauls defeated Roman in the Battle of Alec. And their population starts shrinking after that, right? Visigoths. Sacked by Vandals. So that's the start. That's the start of it. Yep, that's the sack of Rome. Wait, no. Yeah? Demography of the Roman Empire. So I guess when you look at a country, you're looking at how powerful the capital is, right? Like how much money this is getting. I don't know, there's not a lot of data. What is this? Vivid maps. So they just got richer here. Like, I'm sure their wealth increased, right? Their GDP per capita. Yeah, it did. That's the peace and prosperity, right? Grams of silver. It's not inflation. Inflation, that's a symptom. Inflation is not why they declined. Same with America here. Is not their reason. For decline, but a symptom. When city of Rome overspent, they need to print money, leading to hyperinflation. Okay. And then this is that disease. Lead pollution? Yeah, this is why the city of Rome collapsed. Because their aqueducts were destroyed. Around what year? Never mind. Maybe that's not why. Summary of consequences, cycle for Rome, right?
Invented inflation.
Inflation. And you get horrific inflation uncontrolled. So, the economy goes downhill, barbarians are raiding, you have internal instability. In 1 year, you have something like 8 or 9 different guys go through as emperor in 238. So it's a mess. And it looks like the Roman Empire is going to fall in around the mid-3rd century. So this is the crisis. And then the kind of shocking development is late in that 3rd century, they actually stabilize the empire. So you have a series of these kind of army emperors who are just good generals who manage to push the barbarians out, reestablish the borders. It's actually a whole group of them, but often they get clumped under the most successful, the last guy, who's Diocletian, who comes in. And he tries to stabilize the economy. One of the things he does is he issues a new solid gold coin that he guarantees is solid gold, and he calls it a solidus, a solid coin.
Solidus. Is that you, bro? Is that you? Numerian. No.
Famously issues a price edict where he says this is the maximum it's legal to charge for any good or service. So it's an attempt to curb inflation, and that's not gonna
price controls.
work,
He tried
but it
price
helps.
controls. It doesn't help.
Kind of amusingly, on Diocletian's price edict, can you guess what the most expensive sort of item is?
House.
Hiring a lawyer.
Oh.
So some things never change, right?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, in that system, there's probably a huge amount of lawyers.
Yeah, I mean, even lawyer isn't quite the right word. Romans didn't have true lawyers, but they had people you would hire to do legal stuff or give you legal advice. But anyway, no, the price edict is actually really fascinating because it's this long list of stuff, and you can see, a good pair of shoes, a bad pair of shoes, how much each costs, and you can see the relative value of things. So, what was food versus clothing? What was, going to the barber versus hiring a doctor, all that kind of stuff. So it's a really fun document to just mess around with. But anyway, so Diocletian stabilizes basically the empire and these other guys as well, and gives it a new lease on life. So it seems by the end of the 3rd century that Rome is going to continue. And then as we go into the 4th century, you have the really dramatic thing where Constantine comes along and converts to Christianity. And at the time he converts, the percentage of Christians in the empire is small, 10% at most, something like that. Who knows? But it's quite small. And all of a sudden you have this weird thing where now the emperor belongs to this new religion. What does this mean? You can debate a lot how sincere Constantine's conversion was. It's a little...
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. So until it became an empire, the Roman Empire, it was just growing non-stop, right? They had an actual democracy. And then once they became an empire, they lasted about 150 years until it started to decline. Which means for 150 years, they've been stagnating. So maybe that's why. '27 BE. They just abandoned the Republic. They just say we're just going to be an empire. And how did the map look back then? BCE 27. So pretty much the same as the peak Roman Empire, except minus plus a few regions. Maybe that's where it started. Okay, but define empire. What is an empire? An extensive group of states under a single supreme authority, formerly especially an emperor or empress. Okay. So I guess the lesson you want to learn is Republic for growing your country. Empire for stagnating, for keeping your for keeping your country. Keeping your country? No. Keeping your country rich. No, it's kind of like socialism. What kind of economy was it? Was the Roman Republic versus Roman Empire? Was it capitalist, socialist, communist, agriculture, trade, agrarian focus? Okay, substance, capitalism, pretty much. Okay, but no. But how much of it was government economy? Both the Roman Republic, Roman Empire, the portion of the economy directly controlled by the government, varied. From 500 BCE to 27, that's the Roman Republic, much of the government income came from war booty, plunder, and tributes from conquered territories. Taxes. Early on, Roman citizens paid direct taxes, but were reduced as Roman Republic expanded, relied more on wealth from conquered provinces. Expenditures. The largest single expenditure, largely during periods of expansion and warfare. Public works, infrastructure, aqueducts, temples, state-funded. While significant, government's role in the economy was limited and decentralized. Most wealth was controlled by private individuals. Government as a Roman Empire. Right, there we go. It was limited and decentralized. And for the Roman Empire, taxation became more organized. The military remained single largest expenditure, consuming 50 to 75%. And what did you get for it? You went from this to that. You went from this to that. I don't think it's worth it. You're getting ripped off somewhere. Soldiers receive regular pay, benefits, pensions, so the soldiers took it. infrastructure and public works. The empires funded large-scale projects including roads, aqueducts, harbors, and monuments like the Colosseum, which showcased imperial power and provided economic benefits. Okay, so here's some points to keep in mind. Roman Republic estimates suggest controlled the state controlled 10 to 15% of the total economy, most economic activity remaining in private sector. The government's role expanded significantly under the emperors. Estimates control at 20 to 30% of the whole economy, largely due to organized taxation, military spending, and state-controlled enterprises. Government was less centralized, more structured. It's a little bit of growth. If you average it out, it's like twice as big, but yeah. It never approached the centralized economies of modern nations. So the government grew in scale.
Bit of a weird thing where he clearly is using it as a way to fire up the troops before a crucial battle to say, hey, I just had this dream and this god promised us victory if we put his magic symbol on our shields. And this would be okay, except that he had done this a couple times before.
I gotta look into the sack of Rome. About year 400 something. Give me a short.
For the city of Rome to fall to a foreign enemy? Did you know that it took 800 years for the city of Rome to fall to a foreign enemy? That's 553 years longer than the United States has been a country. This event would go on to be called the Sack of Rome. This would be a major marking in the decline of the Roman Empire. The group of people that brought shock to the Roman Empire were called the Visigoths, that were under Alaric I. The Visigoths, a Gothic tribe, sought refuge in the Roman Empire to escape the Huns but were mistreated by Roman officials. This led to the First Gothic War and a significant Roman defeat at the Battle of Adrianople.
The Huns? Wait, the Huns? Hold on, what's going on over here? Whoa, there's something else going on. There's something else going on outside of Rome. Was there another major power? Yes. Persia? Nah, kinda. Okay, but who's the major one? The Hunnic Empire. Yeah, that's the one. The Visigoth. There we go. The Germanic kingdoms. Theodoric the Great. The Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantine Empire. The Kingdom of Aksum. Okay, so I get what's happening. During the Pax Romana, other empires, other powers rise. That's what happened. You had the Pax Romana, and then other powers rose. And that's why they got invaded, right? Other powers take advantage of the nowhere of the pacifist. What is this era called? Of the peace and rise economically and militarily. Hold up. We gotta get deeper into this. What happened? The Huns. By a year. Every year? What you mean? How far do you go back to? Gauls, Berbers, Rome. Rome is number 2. What is the Seleucid? That's Turkey. Yeah, look at Rome rise. Rome number 1, and then what happens? The Gauls, Germanic people. The Slavs. At 30 million. Pretty good. Right now they have no competition, right? They have no competition when it comes to population. And then this is the Pax Romana, Pax Romana. And then you say they peak around here. And then who rises? Something fell. Gallic Empire? Yeah, had a civil war. And they split. Huh? What happened there? They go back together? Hunnic Empire, look at that. Okay, so that's not what happened. What happened was it became an empire for consolidating what the country already has. So you so if you want to create a country, you create a republic for growing the country, and then you make it into an empire to consolidate what the country has. Hunnic Empire. What's going on there? 4 mil. Jesus Christ. Byzantine Empire. It just becomes the Byzantine. What happened to Rome? It just disappears. It becomes the Eastern Roman Empire, and then it turns into the Byzantine Empire. Austro-Gothic Kingdom. Oh, now it's a kingdom. It's not an empire anymore. Oh, Byzantine Empire. That's the new Roman Empire. And I don't know what the fuck happens next.
Being given land in the Balkans, tensions persisted due to Roman mistreatment. After all the negotiating failures, Alaric would go on to breach the walls of Rome on August 24th, 410 AD. Now,
So, if you had to pinpoint it, you could point the start of decline back when they went from a republic to an empire, because that means they were no longer growing as a country.
Alaric was a very skilled warrior and was a strategic threat, but he didn't want to conquer the land, he just wanted to set an example of their strength, so he would go on to fuck shit up and very much so prove it. The casualty count is unknown, but some estimate that 10% of the city's population got massacred. Did you know that it took 800 years for the city of Rome to fall to a foreign...
Okay, what about the SPQR? The Roman Republic, for 500 years, they were with it. Mix of constitution, power share between elected magistrates, senate, popular assemblies. Senate made up of patricians, elite landowners, and plebeians. It embodied the system. Military men used to mark Roman legions in military centers. Yeah, go back to this system. This is a working system. The Roman Empire from 200 to 500 CE, when they got plunged, right? Sack of Rome. Have been sacked multiple times. It's not that they've been taken advantage of. They were just weak, right? They were no longer a major power. Like, can you blame them? Like, if you get bullied multiple times by different people, it's kind of your fault. By Visigoths, yeah. That's kind of Rome's fault. Like, how do you get sacked over and over and not strengthen yourself? And who was the king? Yeah, right, Civil War, right? SPQR. When did they stop functioning? Imperial use. In the Emperor ultimate authority. To 400 to 500. Imperial use, public symbols, was prominently displayed in public monuments, military status, coins, legal documents signifying actions were undertaken in the name of Rome as a whole, even under imperial rule. The empire, though the ultimate authority, still claimed legitimacy by maintaining the appearance that he ruled in partnership with the Senate of Rome. The Senate and Empire largely ceremonial adversary. Okay, but like, still, even if it's ceremonial, that still means it has some legitimacy, right? When did they officially stop? Fall of the Western Roman Empire. When the last Roman Emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was disposed by Germanic chieftain Odoacer, marks the end of the Western Roman Empire and by extension formal end of SPQR. 476, that's the exact year. That's the official end. It lasted about 1,000 years, and that's the Roman Empire, plus the Roman Republic, or the Roman civilization. Rome gets sacked multiple times, mostly due to weakness. Yeah. Rome peaks, 150, 27 BC. So these are the major events. In 27 BE, they become an empire. And then for about 100 to 200 years, they use that asset they built during the Republic to kind of consolidate power among themselves. And then around 150 is when they peak. And everything goes down from there. I'm like, damn, what happened for 300 to 400 years? After 476, the Eastern Roman Empire, known as the Byzantine Empire, continued to exist for another 1,000 years with its capital Constantinople. Yeah, but we're not interested in that. The Roman civilization, that's kind of the end, right? It retained the symbolic use of SPQR and imperial, even though the actual Roman Senate ceased to have any significant role. After the fall of the Western Empire, Byzantine emperors still refer to themselves as the ruler of Roman Empire. It's the Byzantine Empire. Decline and fall of Byzantine Empire. It fell to the Ottoman Turks in 1453 CE. So they had a switch. The idea of Roman Empire in its traditional sense ended. However, Ottoman Empire, which succeeded it, did not use the SPQR as symbol, marking the final end. No, you're the Eastern Roman Empire. Post-Roman use of SPQR. Even after the fall of both the Western Empire and the Byzantine Empire, SPQR continued to be used as a symbol of Roman identity in various forms. City of Rome itself, now under the control of Papal States, and later the Kingdom of Italy, retained the emblem of SPQR as part of city's heritage. In Renaissance, papacy and Roman Catholic Church used SPQR. Okay. Today, while SPQR... But so when did the decline begin and why? Rome gets sacked multiple times. I gotta put it right here. It's like it peaked with Julius Caesar, and then everything after that was the empire trying to consolidate power, and it worked for 150 years, and then that was the end of it. They no longer kept growing. And when did the population peak? Around the same year. Right. The 2nd century? Yeah, during Pax Romana. power and population. Both in power GDP and population. That's it. They've sacked themselves, right? And then what I think happened here was the country becomes a zero-sum game. Instead of an infinite growing. I don't know. Yeah, it just becomes a zero-sum game because it stopped growing. And it all started in 27 BC. That's my interpretation of it. I think it makes sense. And then everything after that is just fuck all, whatever. It's in decline anyways, and these are all the symptoms of it. Like, how do you get sacked multiple times? Like, at that point, it's your fault, isn't it? Like, countries keep invading you and sacking your capital. Like, and you do nothing about it? You don't, like, put up defenses? You don't, like, you don't rally up your country? That's kind of your fault. Like, you don't get to blame the Germans at this point. That's kind of your fault. All right, go on.
Or, so one time it was Helios, the sun god. One time it was another god. Even after he converts, he continues to mint coins and stuff with other gods on them. He continues to worship.
He says something about, did someone in Rome talk about their golden age was over? Yes, several Roman authors and thinkers reflected on the idea that Rome's golden age was over, particularly during the period of empire's decline. These reflections often came from lamentations and critiques about the state of Rome, its leadership, moral, and political decay. Some of the most notable figures who expressed concerns about this decline in Rome's age include Tacitus. He was a historian who lived during the height of the Roman Empire, but his writings often reflected disillusionment with the state of the current emperors. Golden Age reflection. In his works, Tacitus expressed a sense of nostalgia for the early days of the Republic, when citizens' participation and virtue were seen as central to Roman identity. He was deeply critical of the emperors and the way they undermined traditional Roman values, describing the decline of civic responsibility and the loss of freedom under imperial rule. Tacitus's writings suggest he saw the golden age of Republic as a lost era and lamented the corruption and tyranny. There we go. I agree. Context. He was a satirist best known for biting criticism of the Roman society and his decadence. Satires. Golden Age reflection. Juvenal satires often reflected deep disillusionment with Rome's moral decay and social decay. In his famous 10th satire, he criticized the empire's declining moral standards, corruption, increasing wealth, and disparity. He expressed longing days for the Rome was a more virtuous society, claiming that the old republican values of duty, honor, and integrity have been replaced by greed and corruption under imperial rule. St. Augustine, Christian theologian, witnessed the fall of the Western Roman Empire. His work both a critique of the Roman Empire and reflection of the passing of its former glory. City of God. Golden Age reflection. Wrote The City of God as a response to the sack of Rome by a Visigoth in 1410. This event was seen as a symbolic collapse of Rome's former greatness. In his work, he discussed the impermanence of earthly empires and contrasted them with the eternal divine city of God. While he acknowledges the grandeur of Rome in its earlier days, he sees its decline as part of a natural order. Augustine also reflects on spiritual decline of Rome, suggesting the empire's abandonment of traditional Roman religious practices and embraces. Yeah, but at this point, Rome was already in decline, right? In decline. Cicero, this is the Roman Republic still. during the late Roman Republic, wrote extensively about the dangers of political corruption and loss of republican ideals. Golden Age reflection. Cicero often reflected on the loss of Roman republican values, especially in the context of political turmoil leading up to the end of the Republic and rise of Augustus. Rise of Augustus? What do you mean? Augustus, that's the first empire, that's the first emperor. Right? In his writings, he expressed concerns over the decline of virtue in Roman leaders and citizens, lamenting the fall of just and virtuous Rome and tyranny of civil war. He also saw the end of the Republic as a strategic event. So they're all saying the same thing. Like, they're saying the decline in the Republic, marking the end of Rome's golden age. Aeneas of Rome, the historian and author of Historia Augusta, collection of biographies. Okay, so that's what happened. Even before the year 27. The reason it became an empire in the first place was corruption, right? Roman leaders Roman people lose representation in the government, and corruption happens. What happened was Roman people lost representation in the government. And when that happens, it's like, who cares what happens, right? And then that leads to Rome becoming an empire. And then people just don't care. It's like these leaders just don't care. That's what they've been saying. Historian author Historia Augusta, a collection of biographies, Golden Age reflection. In his work, Athena is reflecting the idealization of earlier. Yeah, so they're they become less patriotic, right? Because they lose representation. The country doesn't do anything for them. Golden Age reflection in his work, and is reflecting the ideas. Roman Senate, various periods. Members of the Senate, especially in the times of imperial crisis, expressed frustration with the emperor's rules and loss of Roman Republic's ideals. Reflection. Senators in the 3rd century, during the crisis of the 3rd century, often lamented the Senate's authority and the rise of imperial autocracy. Some senators felt the Republic's ideals of shared power and civic responsibilities were lost forever as emperors took on more centralized power. Summary. I mean, there is a moment. It's right here. When it became an empire. There it is. That's the decline. So what exactly happened here? So why exactly did Augustus declare end the Republic? Known as Octavian, did not outright end the Roman Republic in a single act or decision, but rather engineered a gradual transformation that shifted Rome from a republic to an empire. So he's saying, since people don't care anyways what happens in the government, I'm just gonna make myself the king. People have no say. Because that's what people want. They don't care, right? They don't care what the government does, as long as they're safe, right? They're protected and stuff. He capitalized on new factors, consolidating power, and shaping his role as Rome's first emperor. Here's an outline on why Augustus felt effectively ended the Roman Republic. The breakdown of the Republic, late Republic crisis. Before Augustus rose to power, Roman Republic was already in deep crisis. Political stability, plebeians, patrician. Yeah, because of what's that? The Julius Caesar, right? Military loyalty shifting from the state to generals. Roman generals began to command more loyalty from the soldiers, from the Senate to the people. The shift allowed military leaders to exert political influence and even wage civil war against each other. Julius Caesar, Augustus's adopted father, was a key figure. Civil wars. The Republic faced a series of civil wars, including the conflict between Marius and Sulla, later between Pompey and Caesar. The final blow was the civil war between Caesar's supporters who opposed him, leading to Caesar's dictatorship. Caesar played a pivotal role in the final stages of the Republic's demise. 49 BCE, Caesar crossed the Rubicon, defying the Senate and declaring war on Pompey, which led to the collapse of the Republic's political structure. Just fire him. Just kill him and replace him with a new dude. And if you lose a war, just say, hey, we lost a war. Dictatorship and assassination. After defeating Pompey, Caesar became dictator perpetuo, dictator for life, in 44 BCE, essentially establishing himself as a ruler for life. This undermined the idea of a republic governed by the elected officials. His assassination in 44 BCE by members of the Senate was an attempt to restore a republic, but it only led to more civil conflict. Caesar's legacy. After Caesar's death, his adopted son emerged as political heir to continue his reforms. Rise of Octavian. Second Triumvirate. Following his assassination, along with Mark Antony and Marcus Lepidus, formed the Second Triumvirate. In 43 BCE, to avenge Caesar's death control over Rome, they defeated Caesar's assassin at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BCE. Conflict momentum. Transition to the empire. The Augustan settlement. Octavian presented himself as a restorer of the Republic. He offered to give up his extraordinary powers and return to the Senate and the people of Rome. In a theater gesture, he returned the power to the Senate and was given the title Augustus, meaning the revered one. However, this was largely symbolic. The reality of his power. Despite the public show of his historical republic, Augustus retained immense power. He was granted Imperium Maius, granted his imperium, given control over military and matters and provinces. He held the title of Princeps, or first citizen, which allowed him to act as a leading figure in the Roman state without appearing to hold a traditional monarchy. The Senate gave him power to appoint governors or provinces and maintain control over the military. Augustus essentially became the first Roman Empire, through the title emperor wasn't officially used at the time. Institutionalizing the empire. He worked to consolidate power and set up a system where the appearance of the Republic government continued, but real power rested with the governor. He established imperial control over the military, taxation, legislation, and his reign marked the end of the Roman Republic. Why did he end the Republic? Needed stability, desire for power, military realities, cultural, and historical. Okay, but like, can't people vote for anyone? Can't the people vote to represent their views? Yes, in a democratic system. People can vote, making decisions that align with their values and interests. This concept, known as representative democracy, is a central feature, including the US, UK, and other nations. However, some important distinction between Roman governance and modern representation democracy affect the way representation works. Here is a breakdown. Roman Republic and representation. During the Roman Republic, there were elements of representation, but the system was far different from modern democracies. Okay, tell me how these people were elected. Tell me how this thing worked. How the government worked. Roman citizens, particularly male citizens, could vote in popular assemblies. The assemblies elected officials such as consuls, tribunes, and praetors also passed laws. The Senate. Roman Senate, however, was not elected body in modern sense. Senators were typically appointed based on wealth, status, and political influence. The Senate had significant control over foreign policy, financial matters, but their power was often checked by other political institutions. Tell me how this works.
Why the Roman Republic became one of the most successful and enduring civilizations
It
in
lasted
history.
for 500 years.
This
so.
triumph can be traced back to the birth of republican institutions. The Senate, comprised of Rome's aristocracy, was pivotal in decision-making. Meanwhile, the consuls, elected officials with vast authority, were another cornerstone of this system. These roles, carefully crafted and balanced, were the initial steps towards the complex and efficient governing body we now recognize as the Roman Republic. Thus, the Senate and consuls were the first pieces of the complex puzzle that was the Roman Republic. As Rome grew, so too did its institutions, adapting to the changing circumstances and demands of a burgeoning empire. From a small city-state on the banks of the Tiber River, Rome expanded to control vast territories across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. As the Republic grew in size, so too did the complexity of its governance. The assemblies, for example, evolved to represent the will of the Roman people. Initially, these public gatherings served as a platform for citizens to voice their concerns and influence decisions on matters of state. But as Rome's population grew, the assemblies began to take on more formal roles, electing officials, passing laws, and guiding foreign policy.
Okay, so how does this work? Limited participation. Key difference in modern religion was that only a small portion of the population could participate. So I guess women non-citizens had no voting rights, meaning that significant portion of the population was excluded from the representation. There's a mixed constitution. Okay, so elections, they could vote. They could vote to represent their interests. This could be at local, regional, national level, depending on the structure of the country. So if I was a citizen in the Roman Republic and I could vote for whoever, right? Whoever represented me, right? So what's the problem? What's the problem here? In theory, yes. If you're a citizen, you could vote for representatives who would act on your behalf. However, reality was more complicated, and not all citizens had the same rights. It had a system of representation is quite different from modern democracy. Okay, so what's the problem? Male citizen, okay. Wealth and class. Even among citizens, the ability to vote were heavily influenced by social class and wealth. The Roman Republic had a system where votes were divided among social classes and wealth brackets. Non-citizens. The people living within the Roman-controlled territories were not granted citizenship. Okay, that's fine, but like, if I lived in Rome, what's the problem? The elections were held to choose various officials. Voting occurred through different assemblies and magistrates. Who did you vote for? Okay, so what's the problem here? So if I'm a poor citizen living in Rome, what's the problem? What's the problem? Voting power based on wealth. Voting was not equally distributed. Okay, so can't they just make their way to the ballot box? The structure said that wealthier citizens had more voting power. Oh, shit. The wealthier citizens were grouped in the first centuries, and their votes counted more than the votes of poor citizens who were placed in the lower centuries. This meant that even though you could technically vote, your vote would carry much less weight. All right, that still led to the wealth inequality. Majority of the population was poor or landless. As poor citizens, you could likely have limited access to land, which was the primary source of wealth in Rome. Large estates called latifundia were controlled by landowners. All right. So the poorer you got, the less voting power you had. Without proper wealth, many poor citizens had to work in menial jobs. So the wealthier citizens had more power. So if I was running for Senate, I would have to appeal to the wealthier class, right? Military service. If you're too poor to and serve in the Roman army, you might have had an opportunity for social mobility, but it was risky. Reliance on patrons. As a poor citizen, you would likely rely on a patron. A wealthier and more influential individual, often a senator, hiring magistrate, provide for political or material support. Protection, jobs, and money. However, patrons might always have your best interests at heart. You could become trapped in the system, reinforced dependence on the elite. Military service. If you're poor, you're gonna have an opportunity for military rescue. A wealthier and more influential individual, often a senator or high-ranking magistrate, material support. Social and legal challenges. Limited social mobility was highly hierarchical, and social mobility was difficult for poor citizens. Legal disadvantages. Although Roman law theoretically applied to all citizens, in practice, wealthy citizens often had more resources to protect themselves in legal matters. While the poor might struggle to afford legal representation, you were accused of a crime, you would also face a legal system that was often biased towards the elite. Social unrest and inequality. Class tensions. The Roman Republic was plagued by growing social unrest due to the increasing divide between rich and poor. Same here. While the rich elites lived in relative comfort, the poor were subjugated to difficult living conditions, rising inequality, political exclusion, escalated to tensions, sometimes violent protests, such as social war. Damn, all the way back then. And this is like during their growth period, 91 to 88 BCE, where the Italian armies, who many of them were poor citizens, revolted against Rome's unequal treatment. Frequent riots. As a poor citizen, you would be caught up in riots and civil unrest driven by dissatisfaction with the elite, especially in times of economic hardship. The poor were often mobilized by politicians seeking to gain support, but these movements sometimes turned violent and unpredictable. Rise of clientelism. Dependence on wealthy patrons. You are likely engaged in client patronage. Wealthy patrons would offer protection and resources in exchange for your political loyalty. The system kept poor in subordinate position. Wealthy elites control much of political. Alright. So it was never equal. It's like a hierarchical system. Yeah, that's pretty much what I had. Roman people lose representation. They never had representation. Well, they did, but like not the lower class, right? Year 27, they officially say, you know what, fuck it. That's what happened. And then the rest of the fight is just the empire's on its own. It loses. Rome loses support of the people. That's what happened. They lost the support of the people, and then they consolidated for about 200 years, and they peaked in the year 200. And then everything from that is like everything from that is downhill. It's like you get invaded, can't do anything. Get invaded again, can't do anything. The country splits in half, you still can't do anything, right? You have to rely on tax system. Yeah, you can't blame the fall of Rome on invaders. Like, they're a major power, so they have no one to blame but themselves. Like, how to get sacked multiple times? That's kind of your fault, isn't it? All right.
Worship other gods. But he also kind of seems sincere in his conversion. It's just, I think the question is, how much does he understand his new religion? Maybe more than is it sincere? But that's a real turning point. So now as you go into the 4th century, we have this thing with Constantine, the new religion, and the other thing that happens is the empire is really just too big to govern effectively. It's that thing we're talking about. It's too large, the communication is too slow, and it starts to naturally fragment. And at times they try
that's not
systems
what
where
happened.
they split it into four.
People
So
just
under
didn't care.
Diocletian, he tries the Tetrarchy, where he splits the empire into four, and you actually have sort of four emperors working together as a team. More commonly, it just splits east-west. So from that point on, you really start to have the history of the Western Empire going in one direction, the Eastern Empire in the other.
You still could have had like 2 states and 1 military, or 2 states and 1 king, right? Like, you could have developed a system where it worked, but you didn't.
And to have 2 emperors, though there are moments occasionally where they reunite. So that's a big development as well, and that's a turning point.
So
It
the
was a
most
turning point,
common
because
date
what if-
people say, maybe you can correct me on this, that the Roman Empire fell is 476 AD. They're referring to the fall, quote unquote, of the Western Roman Empire. So why did the Roman Empire fall?
Yeah, this
They got
is a
sacked
real game.
that
Pick
well.
your favorite date for the fall of the Roman Empire. 476 is a very common one. And what happens in that year is a barbarian king comes down into Italy and deposes a guy named Romulus Augustulus. Which is
Like, why couldn't you fight back? That's the real question. You get sacked multiple times and you don't do
Amazing
anything
name.
about it.
It's combining the names of the founder of Rome, Romulus, with Augustus, the second founder of Rome. And so some people say that's the end of the Roman Empire. Sure. But others say it's 410 when Alaric sacks Rome for the first time. Others say it's 455 when the Vandals come and sack Rome and do a much more thorough job of it this time. Some say it's 180 when Marcus Aurelius picks poorly in succession. Some say it's 31 when Octavian wins the Battle of Actium and kills the Roman Republic. Or you can go past that date and say it's 1453 when the Eastern Roman Empire finally falls. And I mean, the Eastern Empire is legitimately the Roman Empire. If you would go and ask them, who are you? They wouldn't say, you know, we're the Byzantines, we're the Eastern Roman Empire. They would just say, we're the Romans. And
that's
they
fair.
have a completely legitimate claim to do that. So this whole game of when does the empire fall is problematic. And
Well, the question I want to know is, why did they fall off from their peak? And that happened all the way back in 27 BCE, I think. They stopped growing from there, right? They stopped becoming a republic. They stopped growing the country, and then they stagnated ever since 27 BCE. And you can say they peaked in 150 BC or 150 CE. But like, that's because they had no problems to solve, right?
And the other thing is, all those dates about invasions that cluster around the 400s, so 410, 455, 476, you have to ask yourself, who counts as a real Roman by that point? Because for a while now, the Romans themselves are often coming from barbarians, are crossing that boundary. Roman generals, they might get raised as a Hun, then serve with the Roman army for a while, then not, or Visigoths or not. That's been going on for a long time. So what makes someone a real Roman? How do you tell that the guy kicked out in 476 was a, quote, real Roman, and the barbarian king who took his place wasn't? That's a very arbitrary decision.
There's so many interesting things there. So, of course, you described really eloquently the decline that started after Marcus Aurelius. And there's a lot of competing ideas there and the tensions.
Just to interrupt you, I hate wishy-washy answers, which is why I kind of...
Marcus Aurelius. That's you. That's the peak.
So I will give you this.
Yes.
I think by the end of the 5th century AD, the Western Roman Empire has transformed into something different.
Yeah.
So I don't know what date I can pick for that, but I can say by around 500, I don't know that we can call whatever exists there the Roman Empire anymore.
And of course, the barbarians make everything complicated because they seem to be willing to fight on every side, and they're like fluid.
Yes.
Which
yes.
they integrate fast, and it just makes the whole thing really tricky to say, yeah, who's a Roman, who's not, and at which point did it like.
Barbarians have been forming large parts of the Roman army for centuries. It's extremely fluid and not at all just clear sides here. So it's a mess.
From a military perspective, perhaps, what are some things that stand out to you on the pressure from the barbarians, the conflicts, whether it's the Huns or the Visigoths?
There was a military strategist, a guy named Edward Luttwak, who wrote this book, The Grand Strategy of the Roman Empire, which was basically about frontiers and how did the Romans define their frontier. And everybody's jumped on this and argued about it and says it's wrong and all, but started this debate among Roman historians about, what does frontier mean to the Romans? Did they conceive of their empires having a border, or was it always expanding, or what? And did they have a grand strategy? I mean, today, militaries have a strategy where we want to achieve this, we want to exert force here, we want to protect these areas. Did the Romans even visualize their empire in that sort of grand strategic way? And it's a real debate. I mean, there's some things that suggest, here they tried to rationalize the border and shorten it by taking this territory. Other people see it as just kind of random. So that's an interesting take, is how did the Romans conceive of empire? I mean, if you look back at someone like Virgil at the time of Augustus, he said, well, the gods granted Rome empire without end. So it's that open-ended thing. But even under Augustus, he seems to be pulling back and saying, well, I'm going to kind of stop at the Rhine. I'm going to kind of stop at the Danube. We don't need to keep expanding forever in the way we've been doing. So, I mean, that's an interesting concept of how do the Romans see their empire? Does it have a boundary? What are those boundaries? What does that mean?
And then barbarians were very much making that boundary even more difficult to kind of define it, even if you wanted to.
Right. And again, the other fun debate is, were these invasions, when the Visigoths cross the Danube and come into the Roman Empire, is this an invasion as it was originally described, or is it a migration, as some scholars have started calling it? Because the Visigoths were fleeing pressure from another Gothic group, and they were fleeing pressure from the Huns. And, I mean, a lot of the early Gothic peoples who come into the Roman Empire.
Okay, hold up. Did they have weapons on them? Did they have weapons on them? That's the real question. Background. The Visigoths were Germanic tribes that's been migrating across Europe for decades. They have been displaced by their homelands, Scandinavia, over time, pushed the Roman Empire's territories. By the late 4th century CE, living as federates, allied people with the empire's borders, particularly Balkans. However, the relationship with Rome deteriorated to poor treatment, economic hardship, and Roman economic military failures. Migrant invader. The Visigoths were migrants in a sense. They were part of a larger Great Migration. However, by the time of sack of Rome in 410 CE, they had shifted from being migrants to invaders due to their direct assault. Their sack of Rome was the culmination of years of tension with the Roman Empire, and it marked a major blow to the empire's power and prestige. What about the Huns? Were a nomadic group in Central Asia. They moved westward to Europe during the 4th and 5th century CE, creating significant pressure on the existing barbarian tribes, including Goths and Vandals. Migrant invader. The Huns were more clearly invaders rather than migrants. While they did not migrate across vast steppes of Asia, their movement into Europe was marked by violent conquest and raiding, rather than seeking permanent settlement or peaceful integration. The Huns pushed other tribes into Roman Empire's borders, contributing to the eventual collapse of the Western Roman Empire. Okay, so maybe that's something. But even without this, they were gonna keep declining, right? Like, they were not rising from their peak. Like, it's 300 year difference. You have time to raise an army or something.
Are basically seeking asylum. They're saying, will you give us a piece of territory to live on within the boundaries of the empire? And in return, we will fight for you against external enemies. And the Romans make these deals with some of the Goths. In fact, they made a pretty good deal with the Goths, one group of Goths to do exactly that. Like, you can settle within the boundaries, we'll feed you, we'll give you a certain amount of stuff, and you fight for us. And then the Romans treated them really badly. They kind of didn't supply what they had promised, and so they turned against the Romans with good reason. So the Romans blundered in these things too.
So is it correct that the Visigoths fought on the side of the Romans against Attila the Hun?
Some of them did.
Okay.
So again,
Okay, so like, if they're not Roman citizens, why would we treat you like a citizen, right? As a Roman? And then they got angry over that, I guess, which is justified.
there were various groups on both sides of those battles. So Attila is the famous Hun.
But at the same time, you really can't secure a border like this. Like, how do you secure this border from like all sides?
And he comes into the Roman Empire and seems to be heading right for Rome to, knock it off. And everybody is so scared of the Huns that this weird coalition comes together of the Romans plus various barbarian groups against Attila in league with some other barbarian groups, and they fight a huge battle, and it's more or less a stalemate. So Attila gets stopped, and he says, all right, we're going to just rest up for a year. Next year, we'll go finish off the Romans. Next year comes, he heads down into Italy, he's heading straight for Rome, and the Pope goes and meets Attila, and they have lunch together at this river. And at the end of the lunch, Attila goes back and says, I changed my mind. We're going to go back up to France, hang around for another year. We'll finish off the Romans later. And, Christian sources say
That's exactly what's happening in Texas.
saints appeared in the sky with flaming swords and, scared away Attila. Some other sources say, well, the Pope gave Attila a huge bribe to go away for a while. Believe whichever you like. But then Attila ends up dying on his wedding night before he comes back under mysterious circumstances. And so that never materializes. And the Huns kind of fragment after his death.
So what was the definitive blow by the barbarians, by the Visigoths?
The barbarians are so many different groups. And weirdly, I think an important one that sometimes people tend to focus on the Huns and the Goths. The Vandals end up going to Spain, conquering Spain, and then crossing over into North Africa and kind of conquering North Africa as well. And Spain and North Africa were some of the main areas that food surpluses were collected from and sent to Rome to feed the city of Rome. And it's after those Vandal invasions or the takeover of those areas that the population of Rome plummets. Invasions or the takeover of those areas that the population of Rome plummets.
The Vandals.
So I think that's an interesting moment where, the city of Rome had always been this symbol, and already it was no longer the capital. The emperors had moved to Ravenna, a little bit north, because it was surrounded by swamps, so it was more defensible. But there is something important about that old symbolic capital now just collapsing in terms of population, numbers, really no longer having importance because literally its food supply is cut off by losing those areas of the empire. And of course, the capital, Constantine had founded a new second capital.
Okay, but who was the king at that time? Who was the king? Years of 5 emperors? What the fuck? Dude, you can't have 5 emperors. You gotta have 1. How do you have 5 emperors? You can't have that. Severan dynasty. Crisis of 3rd century. How many fucking emperors are there? Holy shit. These are emperors, right? Yeah, they're all emperors. Dominant, and this is when they collapse. Damn, like, whoa.
at what used to be Byzantium, a Greek city on the Bosphorus, which becomes Constantinople. He names it not very modestly after himself. And that now is really the dominant city for any of the Roman empires, Eastern or Western.
So if you're actually living in that century, the 5th century, it's kind of like the Western Roman Empire dies with a whimper. It's not like it's a bunch of strife.
There's a lot of moments you can pick. There's an earlier one in the 300s when the Roman Empire, the Romans lose a big battle to, some barbarians that symbolically is important. But yeah, I don't think there's one clear-cut moment. And again, I don't know that it is the barbarians that cause, quote, the fall of the Roman Empire. I mean, this is the other game, as people like to say, when did the Roman Empire fall? The other big question is why?
Or maybe it's just that all empires fall, right? Because they're trying to stagnate or they're trying to consolidate power. Like, that's the nature of an empire, right? It consolidates power.
Why did the Roman Empire fall, if you define it as falling? And I mean, barbarian invasions was the traditional answer. So there's a French historian who famously said, the Roman Empire didn't fall, it was murdered. It was killed by barbarians. But I mean, there's other explanations. Some people say it was Christianity. Some say it was climate. That the Roman Empire flourished during this moment of luck when just the climate.
How many years did they last? About 400 years. And someone said, how long do empires last? 250 years? About 200. Yeah, that's about the time. Or maybe it's just that it's in the nature of an empire for it to fall. Like it consolidates power and then it has a gradual decline. And maybe that's what we saw. 200. For 500, 600 years of a republic, and then it peaks in 150, and then it just never grows from there.
Was good, and then you get this sort of late Roman Little Ice Age, and everything goes downhill, and that's what caused it. There's some that say things like disease. There were a whole series of waves of plague that started to hit under Marcus Aurelius and continued after him.
There was COVID, right? We recovered from it, and we keep growing.
Which seemed to have caused real serious death and economic disruption.
Yeah,
that's a decent explanation. Another popular one is moral decline.
Why didn't you grow from there?
I don't think really works well. You even get the people saying, lead poisoning, but that's not true because they were drinking out of the same pipes when the empire was expanding, right?
Yeah, that's fascinating. But often we kind of agree.
Like, how many people died in the Punic War? Look at the Punic Wars. How many people died there? 100,000, and the population at the time was like less than 1 million. That's 10%. And they kept growing from there. Where was that during the Roman Empire period? Roman casualties, look at that. Third Punic War. It's like 17 years. You lose 200 to 300,000 men. Total deaths. Yeah, there's no excuse, right? You recovered from the Second Punic War. Why can't you recover from a disease?
That's something that you've talked about quite a bit, is the military perspective.
How did Rome come back from that? After devastating wars, particularly the second, Rome faced near destruction as its army saw much of its territory devastated, and it managed to come back even stronger. Yeah, how did you do that? Why can't you do that when you're an empire? The recovery and resurgence of Rome involved a combination of military reforms, political changes, economic resilience. Here's how Rome managed to rebuild and rebound after Punic Wars. Adaptation of military tactics. Learning from catastrophic defeats such as Battle of Cannae, they refined their military strategies and tactics. The Roman commanders like Scipio Africanus used more flexible strategic methods, including decisive battles and strategic withdrawals. These helped Rome adapt and win wars despite the early setbacks. Army recruitment structure. After the war, Rome's armies shifted from a largely citizen soldier model to one that incorporated professional soldiers. This change, led by Gaius Marius in the late 2nd BCE, created a more professional, loyal, and disciplined military force. Veteran settlements. After Punic Wars, Rome rewarded its soldiers, especially veterans, with land grants and settlements. The policy both reinforced in Roman control for newly acquired territories and kept veterans loyal to the state, ensuring a stable, battle-hardened military core for future campaigns. Economic recovery and expansion. War booty and tribute. Despite the large cost of wars, Rome benefited from the spoils of war and the tribute it collected from defeated enemies. After the Second Punic War, Rome took control of Carthage's territory, Sicily, which provided essential resources like grain, silver, wealth. Additionally, destruction of Carthage after the Third Punic War allowed Rome to reap the benefits of Carthaginian trade routes and strategic ports, increased slave labor. The wars also led to an influx of slaves into Rome, particularly after the Third Punic War, when a large number of Carthaginian civilians were captured and enslaved. Slavery became a large part of the Roman economy, particularly in agricultural large estates, leading to increased wealth for Roman elite. However, this also created tensions, as wealth became increasingly concentrated in the elite class. Trade and infrastructure. Rome continued to build infrastructure, roads, aqueducts, fostered economic integration. Infrastructure also facilitated the movement of troops, goods across vast territories, which was crucial for maintaining control, ensuring economic recovery, political stability, expansion of power. The Roman Senate maintained control over key decisions, military leaders gained more power. Cultural, political integration. Yeah, where was this? You had this when you were almost near defeated. Why can't you have that when you're an empire? Why didn't they do that when they were an empire? You know? The Roman Empire did, in fact, go through periods of recovery and reform, but reasons it struggled to maintain the same kind of resilience are complex. Loss of civic virtue and military tradition. Economics and social changes. Wealth inequality and class tensions. After the Punic War, Rome was enriched by conquest and enslavements of defeated peoples, but its wealth was concentrated in the hands of few elite families. The influx of slaves and agricultural land controlled the aristocracy, led to growing inequality, middle class of small farmers. Overextension. Vast territory and overextension, especially 2nd century CE, expanded its territorial limits, stretching from Britain to the west to Mesopotamia in the east, and from North Africa in the south to Rhine, Danube in the north. Managing such a vast empire requires enormous resources, and administrative systems were unable to keep pace. Rome's army, stretched thin across its borders, faced constant threats from both barbarians. Roman military was not always able to protect such vast territories or efficiently respond to multiple crises simultaneously. Unlike the early Republic, where the borders were smaller and more manageable, lack of unified leadership, political instability, and corruption. Let me see. Caesar. When did it begin? Julius Caesar. He died Tell me about Caesar's military days and what years. Early military service. When did the Gallic Wars were most significant military campaigns of Julius? Over a period of 8 years, Caesar expanded Rome's territory and cemented his reputation as a military genius. Starting the Gallic campaign, Caesar was appointed as governor of Gaul. Civil War. Yeah, this was the crossing of the Rubicon. So 49. So 58 to 50 BC, that's when the territory expanded. Let me see. The Gallic Wars. Okay, big expansion. Social war. Okay, so they were overextended. Caesar Civil War. And they just kept expanding. And then peaked there and started the decline. Didn't expand that much. They got France. That's it. They got France. That's what Caesar did. Thanks, Caesar. So you can't put the blame on that. It has to be like the fact that they lost virtue as people. This is all Caesar did, right? And then the Civil War, end of military career. So the political system broke down. Somewhere in year 49 BC. Political Roman republics political system breaks down. I think that's what happened. The system broke down. Because all of a sudden there was this new guy that's commanding how the government works. And then year 27 BC, they just become an empire. Julius Caesar. He's like, I'm gonna be the dictator for life. When did Julius Caesar become dictator for life? In 44 BCE, title was granted him by the Roman Senate after he defeated his rival in civil war, notably Pompey. After his victory, Caesar was appointed dictator by several limited periods, but in 44 BCE, Senate granted him the unprecedented dictator perpetual. It symbolizes absolute control over Rome, consolidating his power and signaling the end of Roman Republic's traditional system of checks and balances. Yep, there we go. That just ended. This move was controversial and alarming many in Rome, leading to conspiracy against them. Okay, so why couldn't they bring that back? Why didn't they do anything to bring back checks and balances after his death? And I'm guessing they had two choices there, right? Power vacuum? Caesar's death left a power vacuum intended to restore control. Just give it time. Civil war. Instead of a peaceful restoration in the Republic, his death triggered a new round of civil wars between Republican forces. This culminated in Liberator's Civil War, a second civil war. End of Republican ideal, loss of Republican virtue. By the time of Caesar's death, Many of the traditional checks and balances had already been weakened or eroded over previous decades. Gradually shifted Roman republics towards personal power rather than collective governance through institutions like the Senate. The military's loyalty to commanders rather than the Senate had become significant force in Roman politics. It was too late to reinstitute the balance of power that once existed, declining influence in the Senate. Once a strong check on power had become increasingly ineffective by the time of Julius's assassination. He already weakened it during his reign. After his death, it was simply too fractured and weakened to challenge the emerging new leadership. The senators who had assassinated Caesar had intended to restore the republic, but their influence was quickly overshadowed by the rise of Octavian and the military. Okay, it was overshadowed by the Octavian. So the Senate fell. They could have just waited, and they could have had the republic back. In 27 BCE, he became the first Roman Empire. He carefully presented himself as the restorer of the republic, claiming that he had and then he acts like he restored the republic, which he didn't. Like, he still held on to the first citizen, right? Political military values. Roman military had become too powerful and too loyal to individual generals rather than the state. After Caesar, military leaders like Octavian had the loyalty of other legions, which made it extremely difficult for any senatorial position to challenge their rule effectively. Okay, so the military had a coup. So that's a big problem. Okay, so the system broke down because military was more loyal to the leaders, to the generals, than the country, which means political power doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean, which means political power which means physical power. Political power isn't backed by force, right? So political power no longer means anything because you can't use force. Rome abandons the republic, becomes an empire. All power must, in the end, come back to physical power, or it doesn't mean anything. And that's the lesson I'm getting from here. And then what happens? Year 27 BC, Rome abandoned. No, this is CE. Year 27, right? The first emperor. Augustus just happens to, no, that is BC. It's actually BC. So Rome, Augustus, Emperor Augustus. Augustus happened to consolidate power during this time, and all of the military, including the military. So it's the military that's the problem. What happened to the military? Yeah, but the system changed after Julius Caesar's death. Attempt to restore it. Yeah, but if the military doesn't want to back up political power, it doesn't mean anything, right? Rome abandons the republic, becomes an empire. Augustus happens to consolidate power during this time, including the military. Then forms a system to pass it down. And then for 150 years, to what, 1480. He forms a system to pass it down, and that system breaks down about what time? When did Roman Empire start getting two emperors? I'm guessing it's around 150, right? 200, right? 3rd century. The crisis of the 3rd century, the Roman Empire faced significant internal instability, political fragmentation. The empire was often divided. The period. Okay, so when did the military stop being loyal to the emperor? 3rd CE, yeah. Or 3rd century CE. It worsened the 5th century CE. Roman Empire faced breakdown of central authority. Military loyalty became increasingly tied to soldiers' individual commanders. So it happens again. Year 235 to 284. Crisis of 3rd century. Wait, I can tab? I can tab. Crisis of 3rd century. Military doesn't know with multiple emperors. Military doesn't know who to give loyalty to. I think that's what's happening, right? Became increasingly tied to soldiers' individual commanders. Yep. Frequent changes in emperors from 235 and 26 emperors, most of whom were overthrown or assassinated. The army in many cases chose emperors based on their loyalty to specific generals or legions. Soldiers would often proclaim their own emperor after defeating or assassinating the current ruler. Okay, so it just becomes this bundled mess, right? And then like the military is like, who do we trust? Who do we follow? Like he's claiming to be an emperor, and then this other guy's claiming to be an emperor. We don't know who to follow, right? And that's the crisis. And that lasted for 50 years. fall of the Western Roman Empire. Yeah, but at that point, it's like whatever, right? It's declined. Stability's over. There's no stability in the country. So you're telling me so for about 300 years since it became an empire, it had a stable emperor succession. Emperor. So it was a pretty stable succession. Yes, for about 300 years after the establishment of the Roman Empire, there was a relatively stable system of imperial succession, but it wasn't without challenges. The early empire, Pax Romana, after Augustus became first emperor, Roman Empire period of political instability, roughly until 180 CE. The succession plan was initially unclear, but over time, emperors began to adopt heirs, often from which their families from the military, Augustus some self-established model, to their heir, which helped ensuring continuity. Okay, so I guess all of this, you could say the political system broke down. The political system broke down, that's it. Whose fault is it? Rome's. Political system broke down. The reason for the sack of Rome is because they didn't know who the leader is. The military doesn't know what to do. Hey, what's up, Captain? The 5 good emperors. I'm studying the fall of the Roman Empire. Why the slow mode? I thought it was in 5 seconds. I just don't want any spammers. What would happen if you troll? Nothing, I think. But it's like 5 seconds, right? Start trolling? I mean, try it. I mean, at worst, all I'm gonna do is ignore you, right?
Perspective is the one that defines the rise and fall of empires. You have a really great lecture series called the Decisive Battles of World History.
So, what? You should say a cuss word and see if you get banned. You should say the F word. Actually, the N word.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of An Educated Member of the Greek Upper Class. For him, these were not just abstract philosophical topics to be debated over a cup of wine,
I don't know.
but
I don't know how the chat system works.
burning issues of direct and painful relevance, not only to himself personally, but to his home city of Megalopolis and being shocked. Polybius was perhaps uniquely, and the kingship degenerates into the third phase, tyranny.
Tap your name, ban the user. All right, I'm gonna ban you. I'm gonna try it. Ban, sure. 13 messages were deleted. Okay, I'll unban you. There's an unban request. There's an unban request. There's an unban request. Oh shit, I don't know how to unban. Sorry, dude. Yeah, you should put in an unban request. Well, rip. Back to studying.
This provokes a group of the wealthiest and most dynamic men to organize together and overthrow the tyrant. They then take charge of running the state in a collective fashion, sharing power among themselves. And the fourth phase, aristocracy, is born. While the initial group of aristocrats acts with the interests of all in mind, once again, over subsequent generations, their descendants become addicted to wealth and status and begin to think only of themselves, and aristocracy degenerates into its corrupt form.
Wait a minute. This video is interesting.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of After School. My name is Greg Aldrete, and I'm a history professor who studies ancient Greece and Rome. Today, we'll be exploring the theories of the ancient Greek historian Polybius, who wrote about why civilizations rise and fall.
Polybius. Who is Polybius? What's his IQ? He was... Where was he born? Which covered the rise of the Roman Republic and transformed the Rome from a regional power into dominant force. 200... When is that? Is that during the Punic Wars? What's the Punic Wars? That's during one of the... That's one of the Punic Wars. Was born in Megalopolis. His work, The Histories Written in Covered Period, a crucial era in Roman history, focused on the rise of Rome and its conquest of the Mediterranean, divided into 40 fucking books. Holy shit. All the books only 1 through 5, 6, and some parts of 9, and other fragments remain today. God damn. Try to recover it. What happened to his books? What happened to it? What do you mean recovered? Did they burn? He wrote the 40 books, histories, but unfortunately much of his original work was lost over time. Damn. Then how do you know he has 40? Here's a breakdown. Surviving books. 6. The books cover the first phase of the Roman history, from the First Punic Wars to the end of the Second Punic War. They're particularly important because they provide a detailed account of Rome's early military conflicts, including Hannibal's invasion and Rome's strategy during the Second Punic War. Book 6. Books contain Polybius' analysis of Roman constitution, introducing his famous theory of mixed constitution. It discusses the balance of powers in Rome, how monarchy, aristocracy, democracy combined to give Rome stability and power. Some sections of Book 9 survived, includes Polybius' account of the Macedonian War, rise of the Roman influence in the Eastern Mediterranean, fragments. Lost books. Unfortunately, books 7 to 8, 10 to 40 are entirely lost. This means much of the later portion of the history, which has been covered, the Romans' expansion and some events after 201 BCE, has not survived its original form. 7 to 8 likely cover the latter stages of the Second Punic War, including the aftermath of Hannibal's defeat and the rise of Roman dominance. Book 4, Book 10 to 40, the Punic Wars, Roman expansion in the East, Rome's interaction in the Greek states. Why are these books lost? Time and copying. Over centuries, the surviving manuscript of Polybius' work were copied by hand. It's possible that later manuscripts were damaged or lost or never copied out. Maybe he never wrote it. Survival bias. Only parts that were considered significant or frequently cited by later history has survived through the ages. Some parts of Polybius' writings may have simply not been preserved as they were not considered as valuable during the later periods. Destruction. Many ancient texts were lost during the chaotic period. Survival through later sources. Livy and Plutarch meant that fragments of his work survived in the form of quotations or paraphrased sections in their writings. It doesn't help in recovering the lost portions of his work. Impact of the lost books. The surviving books are crucial for understanding the Punic Wars, rise of Rome, and the political dynamics of Roman Republic. Summary. Polybius originally wrote 40 books of the histories. The rest of the work is probably lost, possibly due to damage over time, lack of copying in later periods, or destruction from the fall of Roman Empire. Despite the gaps, surviving portions of his work continue to be an essential source for understanding the history and rise of Rome. Right.
As well as what explains the astonishing success of the Roman Republic. So, let's get started. Is every civilization doomed to rise but then inevitably fall? Is there some
I assume it has to
ideal
change at
form
some
of
point,
government
right?
that will allow a civilization to avoid collapse? How can we explain why some civilizations flourish and expand while others stagnate or are easily conquered? These are vital questions that humans have pondered for thousands of years, and they remain urgently relevant today.
It's
They were
political
also
choices.
the exact questions that obsessed a man named Polybius, who lived in ancient Greece over 2,000 years ago during the 2nd century BC. While Polybius was a highly educated member of the Greek upper class, for him, these were not just abstract philosophical topics to be debated over a cup of wine, but burning issues of direct and painful relevance, not only to himself personally, but to his home city of Megalopolis and to the entire wider Greek world. This is because during Polybius' lifetime, the Roman Republic had gone on a rampage through the Greek world, defeating one state after another, including Polybius' own city of Megalopolis. In 167 BC, Polybius was shipped off as a hostage to Rome, along with 1,000 other prominent Greeks. All of this came as a devastating shock to Polybius. Over a century earlier, the conquests of Alexander the Great, king of Macedon, had spread Greek culture throughout the eastern Mediterranean and into the Near East. Although Alexander's empire had fragmented upon his death into numerous smaller kingdoms, Greek culture remained dominant, giving many Greeks a smug sense of superiority. After all, were they not the creators of such magnificent achievements as the architectural perfection of temples like the Parthenon, the sculpted beauty of statues
Hey,
such
that's
as
a
the
penis.
Doryphorus, the clever plays of Sophocles,
That's a penis.
and
I just
the
saw a
brilliant
penis.
philosophy of Plato. The period after Alexander's
This is
conquest
Twitch, right?
was known as the Hellenistic era, and during it, the erudition and ingenuity of Greek culture, coupled with the ruthlessness of the Macedonian military machine, seemed
That can't be
an
working.
unbeatable
That can't work. Are those spears? There's no fucking way this works.
combination. The Hellenistic cities and empires of the Eastern Mediterranean were wealthy, prosperous, sophisticated, and self-satisfied. And then this world was turned upside down. Onto this complacent scene burst the Romans, who swept in from the Western Mediterranean and in little more than a generation toppled nearly every one of the mighty Hellenistic kingdoms. To many Greeks, the Romans would have seemed uncouth barbarians, utterly lacking in the intellectual skills and accomplishments that they prized so highly. How could such relative brutes have triumphed so rapidly over the talented and powerful Greeks? This riddle was so compelling to Polybius that he devoted the rest of his life to trying to answer it.
This
His
military
investigation took the form of writing a gigantic 40-volume history of Rome in which he meticulously described Rome's expansion across the Mediterranean and offered his analysis of Rome's spectacular success. He lays out his motivation right at the beginning of his history, stating, "Can there be anyone so apathetic or lacking in curiosity to have no desire to understand by what means and under what form of government the Romans conquered the entire inhabited world and brought it under their absolute control in a time span of barely 53 years?" Polybius was perhaps uniquely qualified to undertake such a project because he acquired first-hand knowledge of Roman imperialism not only from his perspective as one of its victims, but also from the Roman viewpoint as well. Polybius ultimately spent 16 years as a hostage at Rome, where he was treated more like a guest than a prisoner.
What is that
While
haircut?
there, he became friends with the most powerful Roman family of the day, the Scipios. Polybius accompanied these Roman
Hey, yo,
generals on
Scipius.
campaigns in
The
Africa
guy from the Second Punic War, the hero of Rome.
and Spain. And thus, when it came to analyzing the fall of the Greek world and the rise
Titties.
of Rome, Polybius had truly witnessed both sides. Before looking at Polybius's explanation for the rise of Rome, we need to examine his overall ideas about how and why civilizations rise and fall. Like many ancient thinkers, Polybius believed that civilizations behaved like living creatures and followed a natural biological cycle of birth, growth, maturity, stagnation, decline, and death. The earlier Greek philosophers, Plato and Aristotle, had both expressed versions of this theory. Polybius took these ideas even further and offered a very elaborate scheme. He proposed a cyclical progression of 7 stages of government that form an endless repeating loop called anacyclosis.
All right, let's
He
see.
posited that primitive humans had begun in a sort of anarchic original condition without political structures. This is the first stage. Eventually, a strong leader emerges who brings order and direction for the good of all, and thereby gains the respect and fealty of the group. The people willingly bestow the mantle of authority upon him, and thus we reach the second stage of the cycle, kingship. While the original king earned his position of leadership through his actions, the kingship was usually then passed down by heredity. Over time, subsequent monarchs start to grow arrogant and abuse their power through arbitrary or unjust actions, and the kingship degenerates into the third phase, tyranny. This provokes a group of the wealthiest and most dynamic men to organize together and overthrow the tyrant. They then take charge of running the state in a collective fashion, sharing power among themselves. And the fourth phase, aristocracy, is born. While the initial group of aristocrats acts with the interests of all in mind, once again, over subsequent generations, their descendants become addicted to wealth and status and begin to think only of themselves, and aristocracy degenerates into its corrupt form, oligarchy. The ordinary people inevitably grow weary of the abuses of the overbearing oligarchs and reach a point where they can't take it anymore. The people rise up in revolution and either kill or expel the oligarchs. Recalling their ill treatment by tyrants and oligarchs, they desire neither a kingship nor an aristocracy.
Democracy?
This inspires them to take up the reins of government themselves and create a democracy in which political power rests in the hands of the people. Equality and freedom of speech typically form two of the cornerstones of democracies. For a time, there is harmony and prosperity, but soon corruption again creeps in. Later generations, who have grown up always enjoying freedom of speech and equality, begin to take these rights for granted and no longer guard or value them. Greed leads to inequality, and affluence fosters a sense of entitlement.
But how did America
Both
start
create
off with
resentment
democracy?
among the populace. Deceitful and shameless leaders arise who play upon these feelings by making extravagant promises, vowing to shower the people with gifts. But in reality, these men are only concerned with increasing their own power. With the rise of such power-hungry and narcissistic leaders, often called demagogues, democracy devolves into the next phase, mob rule. At some point, one of the demagogues emerges as dominant over all the others and seizes control of the state, or else there is a general collapse into anarchy, followed by the emergence of a new strongman. Then, the entire cycle repeats itself.
Yeah, that's bullshit. How many times have we seen this? Anaclysosis. Anacyclosis. Summarize anacyclosis. Anacyclosis, a political theory described by the ancient Greek Polybius in his work *The Histories*. It outlines the cyclical nature of political systems: cycle of government, monarchy, rule by one, tyranny, aristocracy, oligarchy, democracy, mob rule, and then restoration of monarchy. Finally, the key features. All right, tell me when you've seen this. This has never happened. The Roman Republican Empire, monarchy to republic. Rome's early history began as a monarchy. Okay, so what does Italy look like now? Transition to a republic, to the last king. This marked the beginning of a Roman Republic. Republic to empire. Over time, Republican Empire government became increasingly corrupt. Empire decline, faded, weakening of institution, with empires becoming more tyrannical, led to eventual division of the Roman Empire, with internal political strife and barbarian invasions hastening collapse. Monarchy to aristocracy. Yeah, but like it doesn't go in cycles. It's like it transitions to each other, but it doesn't happen in cycles. Athens and Sparta began as monarchies. Over time, they became aristocracy governed by a small group of elites. Aristocracy and oligarchy in Athens. The aristocracy was replaced by a more oligarchic system in the early 6th century BCE under figures like Solon, who introduced reforms to curb the power of aristocrats and reduced inequality. Okay, but there's also another political cycle, right? Called the Marxist cycle. Historical materialism. is a primitive communism. Early human societies where resources are shared equally among all members, the rise of private property. Some groups individual own land and others work for them. Feudalism, means of production, capitalism, rise of bourgeoisie and proletariat, socialism, working class overthrow the capitalist system, leading the establishment of socialism, communism. The final stage marks a cycle where a distinct class and the state itself are abolished. The state. So this is describing the aristocracy to democracy, right? I don't know. These two contradict each other, right?
This is how Polybius described his doctrine of anacyclosis. And in his presentation of it, there is indeed an almost biological inevitability to the way in which each stage degenerates into its negative twin. That Polybius would subscribe to this theory is quite understandable, because its general outlines matched up well against the histories of many of the Greek city-states.
Okay, but it also goes the other way too, right? You have a democracy and you get corruption and then you get these oligarchs. So it works the other way too. So like, that's not a cycle.
For example, if we look at Athens, the largest and most famous of them, its development aligns pretty well with the anacyclosis scheme.
Yeah, because it happened
According
once.
to legend, its
He wrote
earliest
the book
rulers
on
were
it.
wise kings, such as Theseus, who was renowned for slaying the half-bull, half-human monster known as the Minotaur. Then as Athens grew in power and wealth, it went through a phase when it was ruled by tyrants. The arrogant behavior of these tyrants caused them to be overthrown, and a group of aristocratic families assumed power. Over time, a series of institutional reforms shifted Athens towards an ever more democratic structure of
It's
government.
easy to say as a cycle if
culminating
it
in the
happened
direct,
once.
radical democracy of the mid-5th century BC, a time that also corresponded to the high point of Athenian power and wealth. Towards the end of the 5th century BC, however, unscrupulous politicians arose who, although pretending to be champions of the people, were really only interested in selfishly advancing their own careers. These demagogues included men such as Alcibiades, who encouraged the Athenian people to vote for foolish policies that led to Athens' catastrophic defeat in the Peloponnesian War and the collapse of the Athenian Empire. During the next century, not just Athens, but all of Greece fell under the control of a new generation of kings, such as Alexander the Great and his successors, and the cycle seemed to have circled back to its beginning. It's worth noting that innumerable later thinkers would be greatly influenced by Polybius's anacyclosis model, and would either comment on it or offer their own versions. Among the more notable of these during the Middle Ages was Thomas Aquinas, the great philosopher, theologian who wrote the Summa Theologica. During the Renaissance, Niccolò Machiavelli, the brilliant and infamous political commentator, best known for his treatise The Prince, was heavily influenced by Polybius, and in another of his writings, The Discourses, offered his own version of the anacyclosis cycle. During the 18th century, the intellectuals of the Enlightenment were fascinated with ideas about the progression of history, and many Enlightenment thinkers subscribed to Polybius's theory. In an essay called Men's Lust for Power, the American founding father John Adams directly echoed Polybius, writing, "Simple monarchy will soon mold itself into despotism. Aristocracy will soon commence an oligarchy, and democracy will soon degenerate into an anarchy." This concept affected Adams so powerfully that he described it as the creed of my entire life. All of this leads back to the central puzzle that had motivated Polybius to write his history. Why had Rome been able to conquer the Hellenistic world so easily? His conclusion was that the Romans had cleverly found a way to step off the ever-revolving wheel of anacyclosis. How did they accomplish this? Rome had initially started out as a monarchy ruled by kings, but in the 6th century BC had expelled them and established a republic dominated by aristocrats. So far, this follows the anacyclosis model. However, by Polybius's time in the 2nd century BC, the Roman Republic had evolved into a kind of hybrid governmental structure that still retained some aristocratic elements, but also vested substantial power in the citizen body and featured elected magistrates. Polybius believed that this version of the Roman Republic had managed to craft a constitution that mixed together elements of all three of the positive forms of government: kingship, aristocracy, and democracy. He thought that by blending these three forms together, the Romans had found a way to arrest their decay and avoid the dangerous and corrupting effects of their negative manifestations: tyranny, oligarchy, and mob rule. Therefore, to Polybius, the factor that made the Romans
Okay, so it never worked. It never even worked.
different and accounted for their astonishing rise was the unique political.
So he made the cycle that says, oh, this becomes that and that becomes this, but it doesn't count for this particular country because they found a way to go outside of it.
Structure
So it
of
never
the Roman
worked.
Republic. He describes it in this way. As for the Constitution of Rome, it has three distinct components, each of them possessing political powers. These respective powers are parceled out.
Yeah, he's coping. He figured out that the system doesn't work. It's not really a cycle. And he's trying to cope. He's trying to fit in how it does work. And it
The whole
doesn't.
system regulated with such a scrupulous regard for equality and equilibrium that one cannot say for certain whether the Constitution on a whole is an aristocracy, a democracy, or a monarchy. If we focus our attention on the power of the consuls, these are the most important elected officials in Rome, we would be inclined to see the system as monarchical. If we focus on the Senate, then it seems an aristocracy. And finally, if one considers the power possessed by the people in the Roman Constitution, it appears to be a democracy. Polybius is describing what today we might term a mixed constitution, a political system in which power is divided among different branches of government that
So
are
where's the
themselves
cycle?
controlled by different groups.
So where's the cycle? So it never worked even once. And he's saying it's a cycle.
Within society. There is more to Polybius's analysis, however. According to him, not only did the Roman Republic cleverly divide political power among these branches of government, but the three components were also bound together in a complex web of interdependency. To quote Polybius again, whenever any one of the three branches of government becomes overbearing and displays an inclination to be contentious and encroach upon the others, the mutual interdependency of all three and the possibility of the ambitions of any one of them being checked or blocked by the others curbs this tendency, and so the proper equilibrium is always maintained.
Yeah, what happened to
To
that?
Polybius, this was the secret strength of the Roman Republic, that its political structure managed to capture the best elements of
But it all gets thrown out the window when you're in a wartime, right? That's what happened to Julius Caesar. It's like, so he's saying there's another guy. Like there's the three branches, and then you can throw that all out the window when you have a dictator, because he sits on top, right?
three different forms of government and fuse them together into a dynamic but balanced whole. One can debate just how accurate Polybius's assessment of the Roman Constitution was. However, in a world in which the current states were mostly monarchies, there was indeed something unusual about the mixed structure of the Roman Republic. If the idea of a government that divides power among three main branches and employs a system of checks and balances sounds very familiar, especially to Americans, it should. The education of America's founding fathers was deeply steeped in classical authors, including Polybius, whose comments on the Roman Republic were among the key influences on the founders of the American Republic. As we've already seen, John Adams was particularly fond of Polybius, frequently quoting him in his speeches and essays and directly stating that they were an inspiration when drafting the Constitution of the United States. Adams was not alone in his appreciation for Polybius's account of the structure of the Roman Republic. Thomas Jefferson considered an understanding of Polybius so essential that during the Constitutional Convention, he sent a copy of Polybius's history to James Madison for him to study. So, was Polybius correct in his belief that the Romans had solved the puzzle of how to stop the cycle by finding the ideal form of government?
How important was it? How important was it to our Constitution? His theory of anacyclosis had significant influence on the development, especially in the times of founding, on how to structure the government to prevent rise of tyranny. Though Polybius's ideas were not directly copied, they played an important role in shaping the political philosophy of key figures like James Madison, Alexander John Adams, Roman model of mixed government. Argued that the Roman Republic's success was due to its mixed constitution, which combined the elements of monarchy, the consuls, aristocracy, the Senate, and democracy, the assemblies of the people. This balance, he believed, helped prevent the decay into any single form of government, especially monarchy to tyranny. Impact on the U.S. Constitution. The framers of the U.S. Constitution, influenced by the classical examples of Rome and Greece, designed the U.S. system to be a mixed constitution with elements of democracy, aristocracy, and monarchy. Democratic element. The House of Representatives, elected by the people, represented the democratic aspect. Aristocratic element. The Senate, originally composed of members appointed by the Senate legislature, served as a monarchical element. The president was designed to combine executive power with checks to prevent the monarchical tyranny, impeachment limited terms, checks and balances. Polybius's mixed constitution is based on belief that interaction and tension between three forms of government can create a balance, preventing any one group from gaining too much power. Impact on the U.S. Constitution, separation of powers, checks and balances, has seen as an attempt to replicate this idea by establishing these three separate branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. The framers ensured that no one branch can dominate. Additionally, mechanisms like veto power, judicial review, bicameral legislation were designed to maintain this balance. Concerns about corruption. It was warned that democracies could degenerate into mob rule, where the masses make irrational or destructive decisions. He emphasized the stability of political system depend on a balance that prevents deterioration of a government into pure democracy or a dictatorship. Impact on the U.S. Constitution. The framers of the Constitution were deeply wary of the political dangers of pure democracy, which they associate with the instability of ancient Athenian democracy and its tendency towards mob rule. This is one reason the U.S. Constitution established republic rather than a direct democracy. The indirect election of the president through the Electoral College, the Senate, and the system of representative government were all designed to buffer against mob influence and ensure deliberate decision-making. Fear of tyranny. As an inevitable outcome of a monarchy left unchecked. He argued that one-man rule, when unchecked, could turn into despotic governance. Impact on the U.S. Constitution, framers, civic rule. Believe the success of the Rome depended not only on the structure or balance, but also the virtue of its citizens, the willingness of the people to put common good over personal interest. Impact on the U.S. Constitution. Framers of U.S. constitutions were influenced by the idea that the Republic required active participation from virtuous citizens. For the system to function properly, people had to be invested in maintaining the integrity of the government and the common good. This idea also influenced the framers' decision to include mechanisms like the separation of powers, which requires citizens to hold their leaders accountable and to promote civic responsibility. This idea, his theory of anacyclosis, had an emphasis on mixed government, helped shape the U.S. Constitution. Okay, so Polybius's idea was that it's not a cycle, right? But like they tend to they tend to jump to the other. Separation of power, checks and balances. All right, that's fair.
Keep in mind that Polybius himself lived at the height of the Roman Republic's success in the 2nd century BC. Unfortunately, beginning about a century later, during the period known as the Late Roman Republic, the system that Polybius so admired would begin to malfunction and eventually implode. It turned out that the Roman solution was not permanent. The Roman Republic did
Okay, so he was wrong anyways. He was wrong anyways. So why take inspiration from this guy?
eventually collapse. Even worse, when it did fail during the 1st century BC, it more or less followed the anacyclosis model. Resentments built up among many different groups within Roman society, including veterans, allies, half-citizens, poor citizens, and even some aristocrats, each of whom felt that they were not fairly sharing in the benefits and wealth that Rome's conquests had produced. The last century of the Republic witnessed the rise of a series of demagogic leaders. Men like Marius, Sulla, Pompey, and Julius Caesar progressively undermined the institutions and traditions of the Republic and placed their own personal interests above the good of the state. They manipulated the common people, raised private armies, and when they disagreed with political rivals, replaced debate or compromise with violence and bloodshed. A round of civil wars ultimately led to the emergence of a new strongman who vanquished all his foes and became a king-like figure, the emperor, a system that would persist for the rest of Roman history. The first of these emperors was a
Okay, but how did
grandnephew
that
of
system
Julius
last for like 1,000 years?
Caesar, named Octavian, later known as Augustus once he becomes emperor. His rule marks the death of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire. It might seem that Rome's special mixed constitution only temporarily managed to arrest the turning of the anacyclosis wheel, and that in the end, the Roman Republic fell prey to all the usual ills predicted by Polybius's scheme. The collapse of the Roman Republic was a complex and prolonged process. Not all scholars agree that it follows Polybius's model, and it is certainly possible to debate this issue. But regardless of how closely you think the Roman Republic followed the anacyclosis paradigm, there is no doubt that it does offer a useful and provocative method for analyzing history. The basic question that it poses regarding whether or not civilizations are doomed to fall is a timeless one that all states, including modern ones, have to confront. If Polybius's 2,000-year-old writings can provide a tool that enables us to better grapple with these fundamental questions, then they certainly deserve to be remembered and studied. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to learn more about ancient history or myself, please check out my website, my books, or the various audio and video courses that I've made with The Great Courses / The Teaching Company. Those are available from Audible, Apple Books, Amazon, and directly from The Great Courses. Thanks very much for watching. And remember, it's easier to make sense of the present if you know about the past.
It just seems to me that the Roman Empire lost grip on power. Like the power split. There was a civil war. I don't know, I think that's what happened. Like the crisis of the 3rd century led to the Rome getting sacked multiple times. I think that's when it really started, right? And there was a crisis of the 3rd century because it was an empire, which really happened because they lost their democracy. So the political decline begins here. This is their political decline. And then this is their military decline. and then year 400 to 700 and plus, that's the actual decline. That's the country's decline. That's just 3 declines. Okay, you say empires last 200 years, right? How long do republics last? The Roman Republic, 500 years. The Venetalian Republic, damn, like 1,000 years. United States, at least 200. The Roman Republic, you already said that. The French First Republic, 12 years. What? When Napoleon Bonaparte declared himself emperor, reason for collapse? That's not really a republic. The Weimar Republic, what is that? Ended when Adolf Hitler became chancellor. Okay, so that was pretty fast. Hyperinflation, Great Depression, rise of extremist political. The Dutch Republic. They're not really republics. Like, they call themselves republic, but they don't really have that constitution. Wait, what is this republic? The Venetian Republic. It lasted over a millennium before it was conquered by Napoleon Bonaparte. External conquest, rise of European nations. All right. So really, it all, like, all the collapses happen because of the military, right? And if, like, a political legitimacy isn't backed by actual legitimacy, actual force, then that's when you decline. I don't know. Or, like, you could get conquered if you're a smaller country, which then, like, none of that matters. Yeah, that's the lesson I learned from it. It's like, you need to back up your political power with physical power. All right. So that's why. That's why they declined.